I stood at the gravesite, the cold wind biting at my skin, but I barely felt it. The weight of grief was heavier than anything the weather could throw at me. My father, the man who had raised me with unwavering love and strength, was gone. The priest's words blurred into a hum in the background as I watched the casket lower into the earth. This was it. The final goodbye. Beside me, my older brother Mark stood stiffly, his hands clenched into fists. Unlike me, he wasn't mourning. His expression was blank, but I knew him well enough to recognize the tension in his jaw. He was waiting. As soon as the funeral ended, before the guests even had a chance to leave, Mark pulled me aside. His fingers gripped my wrist tightly, his voice low but firm. "Lisa, let's talk." I sighed, already knowing where this was going. "Not here, Mark," I murmured, glancing around at the grieving relatives. But Mark didn't care. He never did. "Give me my half of the inheritance, now." I turned to face him fully, my stomach twisting. My father had left me everything: our childhood home, his savings, and the majority of his estate, including the $5 million he had spent a lifetime building. Not out of favoritism, but because he knew Mark. He knew Mark would blow it all in months, just like he had done with his own savings, just like he had done when Mom died and left us a small inheritance years ago. "I don't think this is the time," I said, my voice steady, even as my heart pounded. Mark scoffed, shaking his head. "Cut the crap, Lisa. I know Dad left you everything, but we're family. That money is just sitting there. I deserve my share." I took a deep breath, trying to keep calm. "Dad made his decision, Mark. It wasn't mine to make." His eyes darkened, his lips twisting into a sneer. "You think you deserve all of it? You've always been Dad's little favorite, haven't you?" I swallowed hard, the accusation cutting deep, but I didn't let it show. "This isn't about favorites. It's about responsibility. Dad knew—" Mark laughed, but it was bitter and cold. "Dad knew what? That I needed it more than you? That you'd hoard it while I struggle?" I clenched my fists. "You don't struggle, Mark. You waste. You've always wasted." That did it. His face turned red and his hands balled into fists. "You'll regret this," he spat before turning and storming away. I watched him go, my chest tight, my father's final words echoing in my head. "Don't trust him with money, Lisa. He'll destroy himself with it." I hadn't even had time to mourn before greed reared its ugly head. 2 weeks later, I finally allowed myself to breathe again. The funeral was behind me, and I had done everything my father asked: settling his affairs, making sure the house remained intact, and moving forward with my life. I booked a short trip to Spain, a much-needed escape. Somewhere to process everything, somewhere to just exist without the constant demands of death and paperwork. The first few days were peaceful. I wandered the streets of Barcelona, drank wine by the beach, and let myself feel the grief without distraction. Then, on the 4th day, my phone buzzed. I glanced at it, expecting a simple notification, maybe a message from a friend. But when I saw Mark's name, my stomach dropped. I hesitated before opening the text, dread curling in my gut. And then I read it. "I've taken our parents' home with all their belongings. It's mine now. Already changed the locks." I blinked, rereading it twice. Then, before I could stop myself, I laughed. Out loud, in the middle of a quiet cafe, because what my dear brother didn't know, what he had so stupidly overlooked, was that he had just made the dumbest mistake of his life. And I was about to teach him a lesson he'd never forget. I stared at my phone, rereading the message over and over. "I've taken our parents' home with all their belongings. It's mine now. Already changed the locks." Mark was an idiot. For a moment, I just sat there, letting the absurdity of it all settle in. He really thought he could just waltz into my father's house, claim it as his own, and that would be the end of it? Did he really think changing the locks somehow erased legal ownership? I took a slow sip of my wine and exhaled. This was so Mark. Always impulsive, always reckless, always thinking he could bulldoze his way through life and that no one would dare to stop him. I set my glass down, my fingers tightening around my phone as I started typing a response. That's cute, Mark. Let me know how that works out for you. I pressed send and leaned back in my chair, feeling an unexpected sense of amusement rather than anger. Because the reality was, Mark had just made the biggest mistake of his life, and he had no idea. I flagged down my waiter, asked for the check, and booked the first flight home. By the time I landed back in the city, I was exhausted but laser-focused. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. Lisa, Mr. Holloway answered, his tone warm but professional. I assume you're calling about your brother? I sighed. You assume correctly. I figured. We received an alert on the house's security system a few days ago, noting unauthorized entry. I was waiting for you to return before taking action. I wasn't surprised. My father, being the meticulous man he was, had everything set up legally and securely. His will was ironclad. The house? Still in my name. The security system? Still monitored by my legal team. Mark thought he had taken something from me. In reality, he had just broken into a house that wasn't his. I want to handle this smartly, I said, pacing my apartment. I don't want a drawn-out legal battle. I want this shut down fast. Holloway hummed in thought. You have two options, press charges for trespassing and theft, or give him a chance to leave voluntarily before we escalate. I knew Mark wouldn't leave willingly, but I also knew that giving him the illusion of control would make his downfall even sweeter. Let's give him a little rope, I said, and let's see how much he hangs himself with. That evening, I drove up to my father's house, the house I legally owned. I didn't bother knocking. Instead, I tested the door handle. Locked, as expected. I rang the doorbell. Nothing. I rang it again. Still nothing. I smirked. Oh, Mark. He was actually pretending he wasn't home. I pulled out my phone and dialed his number. The call rang inside the house. I could hear his obnoxious ringtone through the door. I waited. Finally, he answered. What do you want, Lisa? I leaned against the doorframe. Well, for starters, I want my house back. Mark scoffed. Your house? You mean our house? I laughed. Mark, I don't know how to break this to you, but this house, the one you're currently squatting in, it's legally mine. You're trespassing. He snorted. Yeah, right. Dad wouldn't screw me over like that. Dad didn't screw you over, I shot back. You did that to yourself. You blew every cent Mom left you. You burned every bridge. You lost his trust. And now? You're playing house in a home that isn't yours. Mark's voice sharpened. You don't deserve it. That's not up to you, I said coolly. Now, I'm giving you one chance to leave before I bring the law into this. Silence. Then a slow, mocking chuckle. Yeah? And what exactly are you going to do, little sister? Call the cops? You wouldn't. I smiled to myself. You want to bet? The next morning, I woke up early and made a few calls. By noon, I was parked outside the house once again, but this time I wasn't alone. A locksmith van pulled up beside me. Are you Lisa Walker? The man asked. That's me, I confirmed. He nodded, checking his paperwork. Got your proof of ownership here. All right, we'll get started. The locksmith and his assistant moved efficiently, working on the locks as I stood with my arms crossed, watching the front door. 10 minutes later, the moment I had been waiting for arrived. Mark flung the door open, rage burning in his eyes. What the hell do you think you're doing? I smiled. Changing the locks. You know, since you changed them without permission. His face turned red. You can't just... Oh, but I can, I interrupted. I own this house, Mark. You don't. I gave you a chance to leave on your own, and you didn't. So now? You don't get a choice. I turned to the locksmith. If he tries to interfere, call the police. Mark's eyes widened slightly, but he quickly masked it with anger. This isn't over, he growled. I tilted my head. Oh, it is over, Mark. But if you keep pushing, I'll make sure it gets even worse for you. The locksmith finished up, handed me my new keys, and nodded. All set, Ms. Walker. Mark stood there fuming before finally storming off toward his car. I waited, watching until he drove away. Then I stepped inside, closed the door, and locked it behind me. My house. My rules. Mark had played his game. Now it was my turn. I sat in my father's favorite armchair, staring at the glowing security camera footage on my phone. The house was mine again, but I knew better than to think Mark would let this go. He had always been stubborn, too arrogant to admit when he had lost. But this time, it wasn't just stubbornness. It was desperation. And I knew exactly why. My father's will had been crystal clear. The house, the savings, and the estate, all of it went to me. Not because I was better than Mark, but because I was the only one who wouldn't burn it all to the ground. Mark had already done that to himself. Growing up, Mark had always been reckless. But it wasn't until our mother passed away that things really spiraled. When she died, she left us each a small inheritance, $200,000 each. It was supposed to help us start our lives, a safety net, a gift from a mother who had always worried about our future. I put mine away, invested it, and used it wisely. Mark? He partied it away. At first, it was small. Extravagant vacations, expensive cars, and nights out at clubs where he threw money around like it was infinite. But when the fun stopped and the money ran low, he turned to something worse. Drugs. And just like that, his inheritance was gone. Within a year, he had nothing left. My father tried to help him. We all did. Rehab, interventions, financial help. All wasted. Mark would get clean for a few months, swear he was turning his life around, and then, like clockwork, he'd relapse. The last time he did, he stole from our father. $10,000, gone overnight. That was the moment my father finally accepted the truth. I can't give him another chance, Lisa. He told me one night, his voice heavy with heartbreak. I won't be around forever, and when I'm gone, if he has control of everything, he'll destroy himself. I won't let that happen. That's why the will had been so specific. Mark wasn't cut off to be cruel. He was cut off to save him from himself. But instead of taking that as a wake-up call, he was doing what he always did, trying to take what wasn't his. The next morning, I met with my lawyer, Mr. Holloway. Lisa, he greeted, motioning for me to sit. I take it Mark is still a problem? I let out a humorless laugh. You have no idea. He broke into the house, changed the locks. He thinks it's his now. Holloway sighed. I had a feeling this would happen. Your father's will was airtight, but Mark has always been unpredictable. I nodded. He's not going to stop. I need to know my options. You've already taken the right steps, Holloway said. Legally, the house is yours. He has no claim. If he attempts anything else, we can press charges. I hesitated before speaking. And what about the money? The $5 million? Holloway's expression didn't change. It's protected. He can't touch it. Not legally. That should have been reassuring. But I knew Mark. When he was desperate, he didn't care about legality. That night, I barely slept. I kept my phone close, watching the security alerts, waiting for the inevitable. And then, at 3:12 a.m., my phone buzzed. Motion detected, front entrance. My heart pounded as I opened the app. There he was. Mark, wearing dark clothes, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. But what made my stomach turn? He wasn't alone. Another man stood beside him, whispering something in his ear. Someone I didn't recognize. I knew instantly what was happening. This wasn't just a drunken visit. This was a break-in. I gripped my phone and immediately dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My brother is trying to break into my house, I said, keeping my voice steady despite my racing heart. He's not alone. I have security cameras. They're at my front door right now. The dispatcher's voice was calm. Are you inside? Yes, and the doors are locked. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line. I exhaled shakily, my pulse thundering in my ears. Mark had officially crossed a line. And this time, there would be real consequences. The flashing red and blue lights lit up my street within minutes. I watched through the security feed as the officers stepped out, their voices sharp and authoritative. Hands where we can see them. Mark turned, his face morphing from confidence to panic. The other guy? He ran, disappeared into the night. But Mark? He was frozen. Two officers grabbed him, pressed him against the hood of the police car, and slapped the cuffs on. I pulled open the front door just as they were hauling him away. Mark's eyes met mine, burning with rage. You called the cops on me? I crossed my arms. You broke into my house. What did you expect? One of the officers turned to me. Do you want to press charges, ma'am? Mark's cockiness faltered. I saw it in the way his jaw clenched, the way his hands shook slightly in the cuffs. He thought I wouldn't do it. He thought I'd let this go. He was wrong. Yes, I said, locking eyes with him. I am. His face drained of color as they shoved him into the back of the squad car. The doors slammed shut. And just like that, Mark had finally lost. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't over. Not yet. I sat at my kitchen table, staring blankly at my coffee cup as the events of the past night replayed in my head. Mark was in jail. For breaking into our father's house. For trying to steal something that was never his to begin with. I should have felt relief. Or maybe even satisfaction. After all, this was the natural consequence of his choices. But instead, all I felt was exhaustion. Because no matter how much anger I had toward him, no matter how reckless and selfish he had been, there was one undeniable truth that I couldn't shake. He was my brother, and I didn't know how to save him from himself. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Inmate call. Unknown number. It was Mark. Lisa. His voice came through, rough and bitter. You happy now? I leaned against the counter, gripping the phone. Mark, you broke into my house. Dad's house. He corrected sharply. I closed my eyes, forcing patience into my voice. Dad's house that he left to me in his will. A will that you knew about. He let out a dry laugh. Yeah, I knew. I knew Dad screwed me over. Knew he left you everything like I never existed. I tightened my jaw. He didn't screw you over. He protected you from yourself. Silence. Then he scoffed. Wow. So that's how you see me? As some lost cause? Some addict who can't be trusted? I hesitated. The anger in his voice wasn't just anger. It was pain. You stole from Dad, Mark. I said quietly. You lied to him, used him, and when he tried to help you, you turned your back on him. What was he supposed to do? More silence. I heard him breathing heavily on the other end, like he was trying to hold something back. I just wanted something that was mine. He finally muttered. His words hit me harder than I expected. Because beneath all of Mark's arrogance, his rage, his reckless decisions, there was a lost boy. A boy who had never fully recovered from losing our mother. A boy who had spiraled so far out of control that he couldn't see a way back. I swallowed. You need help, Mark. Another bitter laugh. I don't need your charity. It's not charity, I said firmly. It's me, your sister, telling you that I don't want to see you destroy yourself. Mark didn't respond, but he didn't hang up either. The next day, I met with Mr. Holloway again. You're considering dropping the charges? He asked, raising an eyebrow. I rubbed my temples. I don't know, I don't think jail is going to fix him. Holloway leaned back in his chair, studying me. Lisa, I know he's your brother, but at some point you have to ask yourself, is he willing to change? I let out a slow breath. I don't know. But I do know that if he doesn't get help soon, he's going to end up dead. Holloway nodded. There's another option. I glanced up. What? Rehab, he said simply. You could negotiate a deal. Drop the charges if he agrees to enter a rehabilitation program. It's not a perfect solution, but it forces him to take accountability for his actions while also giving him a chance to turn things around. I sat back, my mind racing. Would Mark even agree to that? Would he even try? Or would he see it as just another way I was trying to control him? That evening, I visited him at the county jail. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. His face was tired, his eyes sunken. For the first time, he looked defeated. He didn't speak as I sat down across from him. I sighed. Mark, I'm not here to argue with you. I'm here to give you a choice. He let out a humorless chuckle. A choice? That's rich. I'm serious, I said, leaning forward. I can press charges. I can let the court decide your future. Or, I paused, choosing my words carefully. You can go to rehab. His expression hardened. No. Mark, I'm not doing that. He snapped. I don't need rehab. I exhaled. Then what do you need, huh? Another arrest? Another night in a cell? Another relapse? His jaw clenched. I need my family to stop treating me like I'm broken. My throat tightened. We only treat you that way because you are. He flinched at my words, looking away. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pamphlet, sliding it across the table. Here, I said softly. It's your choice. But I need you to understand something, Mark. I'm not abandoning you. I'm not shutting you out. I want to help you. But I can't do that if you refuse to help yourself. He stared at the pamphlet for a long time. Then, without a word, he picked it up. That night, I sat in my father's armchair, staring at the framed picture on the wall. A photo of us as kids, Mark and me, sitting on Dad's lap, both of us smiling like we didn't have a care in the world. I missed that version of him. I missed the brother who wasn't angry, who wasn't lost. And for the first time in years, I let myself hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, he'd find his way back. For 3 days, I heard nothing from Mark. I had left him with a choice: stay in jail and face the consequences, or go to rehab and try to rebuild his life. But knowing my brother, I wasn't sure which way he'd go. Part of me expected him to throw the pamphlet away the moment I left, to reject the offer out of pure stubbornness. Mark had never been the kind of person to admit when he was wrong. But another part of me hoped. Hoped that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. On the 4th day, I got a call. Unknown caller. I hesitated before answering. Hello? There was a long pause, then a familiar voice, rough, tired, but unmistakably Mark's. I'll do it. For a second, I didn't respond, unsure if I'd actually heard him right. You'll do what? He let out a slow breath. Rehab. I felt something in my chest loosen, an invisible weight I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. That's good, Mark, I said softly. That's really good. Don't make a big deal out of it, he muttered, but there was no bite in his voice. Just exhaustion. I didn't push. I knew him well enough to know that if I made this moment too emotional, he'd shut down completely. So instead, I simply said, I'll make the arrangements. Later that day, I met with my lawyer again. You're sure about this? Holloway asked as he shuffled through the paperwork. If he walks away from rehab, you won't be able to press charges again. This is a one-time deal. I nodded. I know. He studied me for a long moment before sighing. All right. I'll make the necessary filings to drop the charges under the condition that he completes the program. And just like that, the path was set. Mark had been given a way out. Now, it was up to him to take it. A week later, I drove him to the rehab facility myself. He was quiet most of the way, staring out the window, drumming his fingers against his knee. I could tell he was nervous, though he'd never admit it. "This place is fancy," he muttered as we pulled up to the facility, a sprawling building surrounded by open fields and quiet walking trails. "It's one of the best," I told him. "They specialize in addiction and financial rehabilitation. They'll help you figure out a plan for when you get out." Mark scoffed. "A plan. Right." I parked and turned to face him. "Mark, this is your shot. I need you to take it seriously." He didn't answer. Instead, he just stared at the entrance like it was a prison gate. Finally, he sighed. "I don't know who I am without all the chaos, Lisa." His words caught me off guard. I swallowed. Then maybe it's time to figure that out. For the first time in years, he looked at me. Not with anger, not with resentment, but with something almost like regret. Then, without another word, he opened the car door and stepped out. I watched as he walked up the steps, my heart hammering in my chest. Would he stay? Would he run? Would he actually try? I didn't know. But at least now, for the first time in a long time, the decision was his. 3 months later, I was in the kitchen making coffee when my phone buzzed. "Mark." "Hey, can we talk?" I stared at the screen for a moment before responding. "Me. Of course. Call me when you're ready." I didn't know what he wanted to say. I didn't know if he'd changed, but for the first time in years, I had hope. And maybe, just maybe, Mark did too. I sat on my porch, a warm breeze rustling the trees, my phone clutched in my hand. Mark had sent me that text 2 hours ago. "Hey, can we talk?" And yet, he still hadn't called. I wasn't surprised. 3 months in rehab didn't undo years of bad choices. It didn't erase the pain, the betrayals, or the mess he had made of his life. But it was a start I never thought he'd take. And that meant something. An hour later, my phone rang. "Mark." I took a deep breath and answered. "Hey." For a moment, there was silence on the other end. Then, a slow exhale. "Hey." I closed my eyes, waiting for him to speak first. I knew better than to push. "I'm out," he finally said. His voice was different. Quieter, less sharp around the edges. "Finished the program yesterday." I leaned back in my chair. "How do you feel?" He let out a short, humorless chuckle. "Like I just got out of a damn monastery." I smiled slightly, but I didn't joke back. "Did it help?" Another pause. Then softly, "Yeah, I think it did." Something inside me eased. He cleared his throat. "I wanted to say thanks for not giving up on me." I swallowed past the lump in my throat. "I was really close, Mark." "I know." His voice was rough but honest. "And I don't blame you. I deserved everything I got, maybe worse." I didn't say anything. Because maybe he was right. Maybe he did deserve worse. But that didn't mean I wanted him to suffer. "I'm trying," he admitted. "I don't know if I'll ever be normal, but I want to do better." For the first time in years, I actually believed him. A few days later, we met at a small diner outside the city. Mark looked different. He had gained some weight back. His face less hollow, his hands steadier. But more than that, there was something else. Something in his eyes. Clarity. He pushed his coffee around in his cup before looking up at me. "So, what now?" I took a slow breath. "That's up to you." He nodded like he already knew that. "I need a job." That was true, and that's when I made the choice I had been debating since he called. "I have one for you," I said. Mark blinked. "What?" I leaned forward. "Dad's house. It's mine, but I don't want to live in it forever. It's too big for me alone. But it needs some work. If you're serious about changing, if you're serious about trying, I'll hire you to help me fix it up. Pay you fairly. Give you a place to stay while you get back on your feet." His jaw tensed. You trust me with that? I met his gaze. Not completely. Honesty. That was the only way this would work. But I trust that you want to be better, I continued. And I think Dad would have wanted you to have a chance to earn something. Not take it, not demand it, but earn it. Mark sat there for a long time, just staring at me. And then, slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't a promise. But it was a start. And for the first time, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to being a family again. Months passed, and Mark stayed true to his word. He worked hard, fixing up the house with me. At first, we barely spoke, just worked side by side, painting walls, fixing broken tiles, clearing out old memories. But as time went on, we talked more. About Dad, about Mom, about the things we lost and the things we still had. One evening, as we sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the trees, Mark spoke quietly. I miss them, he admitted. I hate that I wasted so much time being angry. I looked over at him. Then don't waste any more. He nodded, but I knew it wasn't that simple.